Date: 37 PST, post-stasis time. Kelch stared at the passenger list, his thorax starting to vibrate with worry as he looked down at the list of names in front of him. This couldn't be right. This couldn't be happening. Why here? Why now? Station Joriel was a Kirkin station. Small, rarely used, a bit of a dump that serviced a few of the lesser-used mining stations. Mostly smaller merchants transporting materials and supplies, as well as a non-insignificant amount of criminal activity that existed here in the outer reaches of the insectoid species' aura of influence. All of those ships going to and fro provided an official reason for travel and an official passenger list. Within the list of ships providing travel plans over the next week, a single vessel stood out to Kelch, a Terran vessel. Their official reason for visiting was transporting supplies to the various mining stations around the area, but the real worry came from the passenger list. 2 Terran crew members listed, one of which had a name that filled the Kirkin reading it with terror. Admiral. "What's wrong, Kelch? You look like you've seen a spirit." Kelch looked up from the datapad he was holding, his wings fluttering with apprehension and antennae twitching from side to side as Parskel, the female Kirkin he co-owned the station with, asked him the question. "What's wrong? What's wrong? Look at this! Look who is visiting the station!" The Kirkin thrust the datapad into the face of the other, while his 3 remaining hands were wrung with anxiety. Parskel glanced at it a moment, her head tilting to the side in confusion. "Oh, we're getting a Terran visitor. We recently joined their alliance, didn't we? That'll be fun. What's wrong with that?" Kelch gave an antennae swish of incredulity at that statement, as all 4 feet of the insect looked back at her. How could she not see the problem? Ignoring the fact that Terrans are 6 feet of angry, terrifying primate from a world so heavy they could punch a hole through my chitin with their bare hands, it's an admiral. Literally a top military man from a Death Worlder species. Huh. Neat. Wonder why they're coming here. Anyways, what's the issue? The response from Parskel caused Kelch to take flight a few inches off the ground in anxiety and annoyance, wings beating to keep the insect in the air as their 4 arms gestured wildly. "What's the issue? What's the issue? You remember what a crap hole we own, right? We don't sweep too often because I'm convinced the dust is load-bearing and keeping the entire station from breaking apart. When was the last time we got the grav generator serviced?" "Well, I think that was a couple of decades ago when the service came free with the..." "When did we last change the filters on the air filtration system? It's the 1st of the month right now, so 10, 20. When was the station built? How much of the business passing through the station is illegal smugglers? How can we really define illegal..." "Okay, I get your point. Maybe they won't mind and will think it's normal." Keltich stopped flitting about, finally landing as he just stared at his business partner, anxiety giving way to an incredulous feeling, as if Parskel had said the most stupid of things. This is a top military mind of the Terrans. The last time someone pissed them off, they blew up one of the Hatil's worlds. Well, the Hatil did declare war on them, and they kinda suck technologically. It won't be that bad, right? "I'm not taking that risk." Kelch took on a more authoritative voice as he spoke, the change in demeanor suggesting action and a plan to be had. "We need to clean up, make sure everything is in tip-top shape, ensure nothing illegal is happening while the Terran is here, all in 5 days. All 4 of his hands held his head in despair as the size of the monumental task that lay ahead of the Kirkin fully hit him. God, the Terran Admiral is going to kill us. Kelch could feel a silent rage building inside of him as he looked around the engine room. He'd not been down here in years, but the once shiny room was a travesty. The control panels and various diagnostic systems were somewhere under all of the mess, but every single surface was covered in rubbish. Half-worked on broken pieces of machinery, empty food containers, and mold-covered drinking glasses. The Kirkin was lucky he could fly, otherwise he'd be wading knee-deep in the grime. Even worse was the lack of professionalism of the general working environment. Plastered all over the walls and various pieces of equipment were photos and stickers of a not-safe-for-work nature. At the center of all of this sat the man who was supposed to be in charge, the Kirkin engineer, who was hired to maintain the station's engines, seemingly unconcerned about the state of the room. "What in the ever-living scorch is all this?" Kelch's voice rang out with rage as he stared upon the absolute disgrace that his station was in. Sure, Kelch knew that the station was hardly a five-star establishment, but this was... There were no words for it. "Dude, you need to chill, you're harshing my vibe." Kelch stared at the man who technically had the job title Chief Engineer of Station Joryle. Sure, the guy was cheap and had no real experience when he'd hired him 5 years ago, but this was... "Are you high right now?" "Ha ha, how can I be high when I'm not even flying? You look stressed. I got a little something for that. The guys down at the docking station got it for me." Kelch felt like he was going to have an attack in at least one of his hearts, the stabbing chest pains increasing whenever he stared at the monstrosity that lay around him and the complete lack of care his engineer seemingly had. "I'm stressed because this place is a mess, you are on drugs, and a Terran Admiral is going to be here in 5 days. Bro, don't flutter, dude. Terrans don't exist. They're an imaginary creation of the government to scare people into paying their taxes. That's why I don't pay tax to anyone." That was it. Kelch flew over to the drugged-out engineer, spinning the insect's chair to face him as he screamed at the Kirkin with the rage of a million suns. "Terrans exist, and they are going to tear you apart with their Deathworlder strength unless you fix this. I want this mess cleaned up. I want every log of every piece of maintenance done in the last 2 years and get rid of these posters and stickers as well. Dude, party foul." The engineer's antennae were twitching with worry as Kelch was completely up in his face. "Those stickers are official engineer supplies. You can't get rid of them." "That is not an engineering piece of equipment. That is a sticker of a Kirkin woman, with her brood capsule showing to the world." Kelch whispered the last part angrily. "Get rid of it!" With that, the Kirkin reached over to the offending sticker, tucking his insectoid fingers underneath the glue-covered paper and starting to peel it off the console it was attached to. The room was plunged into darkness as the power went out, the sound of machines and various processes that kept the inhabitants of the station alive, all going silent at once. A clicking, clunking sound echoed through the room as the backup life support systems tried to spin to life, a few moments passing before those machines gave up, leaving the pair and every member of the station in the dark. Slowly, with a feeling of dread and fear, Kelch slapped the offensive sticker back where he found it, hoping that the life support systems would start running again. Thankfully, the lights turned back on with a lengthy stutter as the machines running the space station once again started to spin and churn. "See, dude? I told you that sticker was important. Why is the entire ship's power supply being held together with a sticker? How long has this been going on? Bro, it's not just that sticker, it's all the stickers, and it's been working for 2 years, so who cares? It's all good." Kelch was suddenly a lot less concerned with the arrival of the Terran Admiral, and a lot more concerned with the station exploding while he stood in it. "I know I haven't been paying too much attention to the nitty-gritty day-to-day running of the station, but is it really this bad? This is not good. Exactly what is wrong with the station that we have a load-bearing sticker? I don't know, it's kind of weird, bro." "How do you not know? I hired you because you have a degree in theoretical warp engineering. It is literally your job to know." "Dude, I said I have a theoretical degree in warp engineering. Stop being so harsh, dude." Kelch was going to kill him. The Kirkin was going to murder this supposed engineer. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the idiot and lifted him out of the chair, wings beating furiously as he screamed at the fraud with every fiber of his being. "You are going to clean this place up. You are going to work out what we need to do to fix this place, or by everything holy and righteous in this universe, when the Terran Admiral arrives, I will feed you to the 6 FT tall Deathworlder primate. Do you understand?" The quivering antennae on the engineer stated that whatever drugs he was on wasn't enough to counteract the harsh vibes that Kelch was now giving off. I'll get right on that." Of all the places on Station Jorial, the kitchen was the closest to being decent. Before Kelch had saved up enough to get into the world of investing and buy this station, he had worked in a variety of kitchens. He didn't know much about engineering or docking procedures, but he did know enough about kitchens to hire employees good enough to keep things running. It was probably the most important part of running a station. Pilots and cargo haulers would forgive a lot of things if they could get a decent meal and drinkable stimulants. So listen up. We're going to be visited by the most important visitor this station has ever had in 2 days' time. 2 days. That's all he had left. The last 3 days had been a terrible blur of cleaning and trying to fix everything that had been left abandoned over the last decade. Replacing the air filtration system filters had been a horrific task in claustrophobia. Trying to test the emergency fire suppression system had caused a small fire, and Kelch had discovered 3 janitors on the payroll who hadn't turned up for work for several years. Still, the Kirkin couldn't help but feel that he was starting to win this battle. So, I want there to be the best platter we have to offer. I know you are all capable of making something to wow and impress. Kelch could see a small amount of excitement building in the 5-man crew. The 4 Kirkin and single amphibian Zorthian that made up the kitchen staff were all surprisingly talented for their place of work, and the chance to spread their culinary wings was one they didn't get often. This member is also a death worlder, meaning even the dangerous stuff is allowed. Capsaicin, caffeine, arsenic, cyanide. I'm trusting in you all to give our guests the best meal he's eaten outside of his home planet. Who is this mystery guest? Asked the head chef, antennae twitching with excitement as he asked. Our new galactic partners, a Terran, large primate death worlders, very strong, very powerful. Not only that, one of the pair will be an admiral. The change in the demeanor of the cooking staff was immediate, the 4 Kirkin losing all enthusiasm and glancing at each other with worry and fear. Each of them silently and without a word dropped whatever they were holding and started to leave the kitchen, pushing past Kelch in order to exit. Wait, what's wrong? Where are you going? The station owner chased after the 4, frantically trying to stop most of his kitchen staff from leaving as they made a beeline to the docking bay of the station. If you're worried about them being death worlders, I've been told that they're perfectly safe. They don't eat people at all. At this, his head cook turned to face Kelch, his brief hopes that they were reconsidering abandoning their post dashed by the Kirkin's next words. Look, Kelch, I'm going to be honest with you because you're a real one. All of us have way too many warrants to be in the same system as an admiral, let alone on the same station. If the job still exists in 3 days' time, then we'll be back. But until then, I've got priors and missed court dates. I can't be having an Admiral Deathworlder finding out about those. There was nothing Kelch could say to the 4 as they took the first transport off the station they could, not even taking the time to retrieve their belongings, making good on their promise of placing as much distance between themselves and the eventual arrival of the Admiral, leaving the station owner alone and in despair. With heavy hearts, Kelch made his way back to the kitchen, where the last remaining staff member stood, the Zorthian still silently doing prep work where he'd left him. Well, at least you're still here. There was a moment as the amphibian looked up for a moment, confused, before fiddling with a device that sat in their ear. Sorry, boss, did you need me? I had my translator turned off as I was listening to music. Did you say something? The day was finally here. Kelch stood in the docking bay, his 4 hands being wrung together in worry as he watched the ship approach. The station was in a passable state. The engines had been fixed to the point where he was relatively certain it wasn't going to explode. Catering had been ordered in to replace his kitchen staff. The Yult mite infestation had been reduced to manageable levels, and the cargo haulers who had been running a spice ring had been let go and driven off of the station. Keltich had been awake for 5 solid days and was only awake right now due to said spice ring, but Station Urail was passable. Not a 5-star establishment, not even nice-looking, but passable. Maybe the Terran Admiral would be fooled. Kelch was alone as the Terran's vessel docked, its name mostly duct tape painted on the side. Parskel had long since collapsed with exhaustion, leaving the single Kirkin alone to greet the Admiral. But all gods be damned, he wasn't going to fail at this last hurdle. The Terran's ship was surprisingly small, ratty-looking even, its paint fading and an outside that could have honestly done with a scrub-down. Kelch was expecting something far more grandiose, of silvers and golds, more like royalty. Still, it did kind of make sense. The Terrans were a Deathworlder species. They probably didn't care for aesthetics and put a greater value in functionality. Maybe they'd be impressed with Station Uriel's minimalist efficiency. The door to the small vessel opened, and Kelch got to see his first Terran. They really were as scary as the descriptions made them out to be, towering over the average Kirkin at over 6 feet tall. The primate that exited was wearing a spacesuit, but underneath the protective fabric he could clearly seethe powerful muscles that could tear through an exoskeleton like paper. The Terran stumbled out of his vessel, the flightless mammal taking a few steps down the exit ramp as they looked around for a few moments before finally taking their helmet off. This was not what Kelch was expecting. Messy, wild hair, an unshaven face, and bags under their eyes from a lack of self-care. Sure, Kelch had never seen a Terran in the flesh before, but they had seen pictures of their diplomats and generals on the news. This figure did not look like them. This figure looked like 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Confusion gave way to understanding as the Kirkin remembered that the manifest had 2 names on it. Clearly, this second person, a Cameron Stanley, was the Admiral's bodyguard. Yes, such a rough individual made sense for a Deathworlder tasked with protecting such an important person. Kelch flew over as fast as he could to greet the Terran, who was getting more and more confused. The Kirkin had done their research, so Cameron had left his ship to a literal red carpet laid out in the middle of the docking bay, a small buffet of food placed to the side. Kelch held out a hand in a traditional Terran greeting, which Cameron took and shook awkwardly, trying to blink past the absolute hangover he was nursing from the activities of the days before. "Hello, Terran delegate. This is Station Joreal, and I am its owner, Kelch. We are so glad you have decided to grace us with your presence." Cameron just stared blankly back at the strange insect, trying to look past his banging headache at a cargo bay which was just too bright. "What?" Kelch paused for a few moments before deciding that this bodyguard was clearly a man of few words, being a man of action. The Kirkin guided an increasingly bewildered Cameron towards the buffet. "The station is perfectly secure, safe, and a state-of-the-art facility. You and your charge may enjoy this complimentary edible selection that I hope fulfills your Deathworlder palate." Cameron looked down at the selection of food laying before him. He gave an involuntary groan at the thought of eating in his current state. Just as well, since in an attempt to impress, Kelch had gone out of his way to procure Deathworlder-ready catering, making the vast majority of the food on offer very lethal to even Terrans. "Oh, I couldn't right now, but thanks." Another awkward pause, as both Terran and Kirkin stood in silence, both waiting for the other to make the first move. A growing feeling of discontent emanating from both sides. Cameron was way too hungover to understand what was going on, so Kelch had to break the silence first. "So, as you can see, everything is safe. Will the Admiral be exiting soon?" "Who?" The Terran turned back to look at his ship, confused, wondering if he picked up an extra passenger during the last week's events, while Kelch started to get worried that this was somehow a different Terran vessel. "The second person on your manifest, and Admiral cleans a lot." Cameron gave a laugh at that. "Oh yeah, well, this isn't really his vibe. Little guy would get lost out here." "It really is no trouble. We can make sure that the Admiral stays safe." Cameron gave another laugh at that. The idea of this insect protecting the Admiral making the Terran giggle, fading away as he realized the Kirkin was being serious. "Wait, you're not joking? The Admiral can't come out in this environment?" There was a pause as Kelch understood those words, the insect eventually deciding to get angry at them, insulted even. 5 days ago, if he'd known the Admiral was too stuck up to even leave his ship, he would have been overjoyed. But after 5 days of tireless work, God damn it, he wanted some respect. "What, am I not good enough to even be graced with his presence? I know this isn't the best station or the most famous, but to not even give the briefest of greetings, it's rather very rude and shows the Terrans in a bad light." At this, Cameron gave a single raised eyebrow, a smirk hovering over his lips. "You want to see the Admiral? Sure, just follow me and you can meet him." That was what they did, Kelch following the Terran into his vessel, a dingy, dirty thing. Smaller than expected, lacking maintenance or care, a simple cargo hauler. If anything, it was worse than the station, filled with empty beer cans and needing a severe deep clean. A small part of the Kirkin's mind was putting something together that this wasn't right, but the annoyance of being snubbed by the Terran Admiral was clouding out that part of his judgment. Finally, with an overactive flourish, Cameron pointed to the esteemed Admiral, announcing him with an over-enthusiastic and regal voice. "Now introducing, for the station owner's pleasure, the Honorable Admiral Cleans-a-Lot." The cleaning drone trundled along the floor, completely oblivious to the two people watching it. Bouncing off of the walls as it did so, the tricorn hat taped to the top wobbling as it moved. Kelch just stared at it for a moment, feeling all of the life drain out of his body as he watched the little mindless drone go about its cleaning. Is this a trick? This cannot be! This is Admiral Cleans-a-Lot. The ship wouldn't run without the little dude. Honestly, he's the real brains of the operation. Kelch turned to look at the Terran, who was looking rather smug with himself. But why? I've spent the last 5 days doing nothing but getting ready for an admiral to visit, and I find that you've given a cleaning done a military rank. But why? The Terran paused for a moment, seemingly considering their next response. Honestly, it's kind of funny. An unholy scream erupted from Kelch's thorax as the pressure of the last 5 days erupted in one moment. Maybe it was his exhaustion, maybe it was the illegal substances he was using in order to stay awake. But the Kirkin did something he thought he'd never do, and launched himself in a rage at Cameron, trying to wrap his hands around the stupid primate death-worlder to throttle the idiot. Memo to all Terran citizens traveling outside Terran Conclave space. Stop naming cleaning drones with official military or diplomatic titles. It confuses people. Jan Eagles.